All right, NBA All-Star Weekend is officially over, and I think this is a perfect time to recap how some teams were able to perform in the first part of the season and also make predictions about their playoff upside as we are slowly starting to get to that point. I am going to focus today specifically on none other than the Detroit Pistons, who are currently seated with the number 1 spot in the Eastern Conference. This team is doing it with a very strong two-way attack. Right now, they're 10th in offensive rating, and that includes them being at the number 10 spot in points per game, number 6 in field goal percentage, number 11 in assists per game, and they're also an elite level offensive rebounding group, sitting at the 4th spot across the entire league in that category. Their defense has been flat out dominant and one of the best across the entire league. Right now, they're number 2 in defensive rating, and they're doing an amazing job at forcing their opponents to take a limited amount of shots, sitting at the number 1 spot in opponents' field goal attempts and 2nd in opponents' field goal percentage. They're also 5th in opponents' 3-point percentage, number 3 in opponents' points in the paint, and number 3 in opponents' points per game. But here is one of my favorite numbers from this team and their attack on the defensive end. They are number 1 right now in opponents' assists per game, which means they're doing a great job at stagnating offenses to a very high degree and forcing them into tough looks. So to sum up their defense, they're doing an amazing job at limiting their opponent's amount of shots, and the shots that their opponents are getting are relatively tough ones. So again, this team's two-way attack has been scary, especially their defense, and a lot of credit not only goes to the players, but it has to go to JB Bickerstaff, who in my opinion is just one of the most underrated coaches across the entire league. His success as a head coach goes beyond his current record right now at the Pistons. If you think about him through the course of his career, he has been amazing at getting the best out of these young cores. Think about him during his time with the Cavaliers. Back in that 2022 season, he helped them make their first somewhat playoff appearance, getting them to the play-in tournament with Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. So he helped the Cavaliers find some level of success and better direction for the first time in the post-LeBron James era. Then you look at him his last couple of years here with the Pistons. After having a historically bad losing streak, he helps this team become a real threat out in the Eastern Conference, leading up to, again, this season where they are the best team right now out east. I do want to talk a little bit about Cade Cunningham because I think he is at a very interesting part in his NBA career. He is definitely establishing himself as a top 10 level player across the entire league, but I do wonder at this point in time, what is his upside as far as being a number 1 option on a playoff contending group? You do have to give him a ton of credit for playing to his strengths on the offensive end. Right now, he is putting up 25.3 points on 46% shooting and is dishing out 9.6 assists, which is a career high. He has been great in the mid-range area, making about 47% of his looks from that zone, and that is well above league average of 44%, and that makes up about 15% of his total shot attempts. He has also been an elite paint finisher, as he is making around 47% of his looks in that zone, which is also above league average and makes up about 28% of his total offense. And then there's the playmaking, which is something that he has gotten better at season in and season out. According to Crafted NBA, he is in the 99th percentile in creation, which is a per 100 estimate of how many open shots he is generating for his teammates. But again, here's where my concern comes with him as a number 1 option on a playoff team that is trying to make a really deep run in the postseason. Right now, he has not been great at all from a 3-point shooting perspective, making just 33% of his threes this year. About 28% of his total shot attempts are coming from the above the break zone from downtown, and he is only making 30% of those, which is well below league average. Turnovers can also be a bit of an issue for Cade at this point in his career, and I get it. He's a point guard and he is carrying a pretty heavy load on offense, and that happens with a lot of players in his situation, but it is still something he'd want to clean up as Detroit is heading into the playoffs and the game slows down once the postseason rolls around. So again, I think Cade is an amazing player, right? And he has done some great things through his career, and I do think there is a strong argument for him currently being a top 10 player across the entire league. And he is very resilient, right? Like him being able to work through some really rough years in Detroit, including a really bad season in that 2023-24 season, to now being the best player on a number 1 seed. It says a lot about him and his intangibles. But again, there are some legit questions right now about how far he can bring Detroit as a number 1 option with some serious limitations in his offensive game. Now, as far as his shooting goes, there is this. If you look at SGA last year in the playoffs, he was able to have an amazing run and won a championship championship and a finals MVP award, and he only made 28% of his looks from downtown through the postseason. So there is a world where you can have a point guard who is not dominant as a distance shooter, lead a team to a deep playoff run, and that particular limitation in his game is not completely holding his team back. So we'll see what happens, but I do think there are some legitimate things that we should keep a magnifying glass on Cade for. And some of Cade's offensive issues are a microcosm of Detroit's offensive issues as a whole. Like Cade, this team is not a great three-point shooting group, as they are number 21 in the NBA in percentage and 27th in three-point attempts. So they're not getting a lot of three-point shots up, and the ones they are getting are not going down. Now, they did add Kevin Huerter at the trade deadline, and he has been below his standard as a shooter from distance this season, making in the low 30s. But if he can find his stroke with Detroit, he can be an amazing floor spacing option for this team, especially in closing situations. This team also does struggle with turning the ball over. Right now, they're number 23 in the NBA in turnovers per game. And if you look at that bottom half of the NBA in that particular number of turnovers per matchup, the Pistons are the only real contender that are sitting within that range. So I'm saying all of that to say this. I love where the Pistons are at as the number 1 seed out east. They have put in some amazing work, especially on the defensive end, and they're deserving of their current spot. But there are some legitimate questions and concerns for this team to pay attention to as we slowly head into the playoffs in the spring.